Appointed by the mayor and city council to plan for the orderly growth and development of the community, to hold public hearings, and to make recommendations to the city council on planning items. Please note that the city council rules state that the public hearings for planning cases shall be conducted solely by the planning commission. No additional public hearings will be conducted by the city council. Tonight's cases are tentatively scheduled to be heard by the City Council next month. Agendas can be found at topeka.org. For cases that require public hearings, the procedure will be as follows. First, the Planning Department staff will summarize the case. Next, we will hear from the applicant or their representative. Then we will receive public testimony. Public comments should be addressed solely to the chair and are limited to 4 minutes. Chris, take the roll, please.
Mr. Dean is absent. Mr. Freed?
Here.
Ms. Herron?
Here.
Mr. Kanar is absent. Mr. Kalp?
Here.
Ms. Messina?
Here.
Ms. Pearson?
Here.
Mr. Jabavin?
Here.
And Mr. Warner?
Here.
We have 7 present for a quorum.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is the approval of minutes for the May 16 meeting. Are there any changes or corrections to be offered? Mr. Cow?
Mr. Chairman, on the third page of the minutes, on the paragraph right before communications to the commission, it says motion. 2 commissioners got the credit, including myself, for the motion. And just for the record, it'd be nice to clean that up.
Okay.
Commissioner Kennard's not here. Otherwise, I'd flip in for the honor of the motion.
I'd prefer an arm wrestle, but I guess we'll have to put that off. Is there a correction? Do you have a preference, Mr. Cow?
I do recall offering the motion, but
All right.
it may have been simultaneous. I don't know.
All right, so is there a correction? So I guess we're asking for a correction to reflect Mr. Kalp made the motion. Is there any other changes to be reflected? With that, do I hear a motion to accept the minutes as amended by the, mentioned by Mr. Kalp?
So
Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion, a second. Is there any further discussion? Not hearing none. Chris, would you take roll, please?
Mr. Freed?
Aye.
Ms. Herron?
Aye.
Mr. Kalp?
aye.
Ms. Messina?
Abstain.
Ms. Pearson?
Aye.
Mr. Jabavin?
Aye.
And Mr. Warner?
Aye.
Motion passes 6-0 with 1 abstaining.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda, item C, is declaration of a conflict of interest or ex parte communications by members of the commission or the staff.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Warner, I'm going to recuse myself from public hearing case CU 2202 by Providence Homes. I have a declaration of a conflict of interest, a business interest in that,
All right.
with one of the people representing the neighbors this evening. So,
All right, thank you. We'll have you step out before we take that on, and then we'll remember to call you back in for the rest of the docket.
all right, thank you.
Any other conflicts of interest or ex parte communications to be reported? All right, not hearing any. We will then move on to item D, public hearings. First item is PUD 2203 regarding the Fairlawn Acres development by Flywheel Fairlawn LLC.
Commissioners, I will present this item. Dan Warner with the Planning Department. So the property that's with this project is located at 605 Southwest Fairlawn Road. It's approximately 5.7 acres. The property is currently zoned for high-density apartments. The project ultimately will consist of 2 4-story apartments with studio and 1-bedroom units. The PUD allows a maximum of 255 apartments on that property. The PUD also includes an area for an undisclosed, at this time at least, commercial area. Staff is recommending approval of the PUD subject to the conditions listed in the staff report. I will note that the PUD is necessary in this case because of the variance for the density for this property and also for parking.
Are there any questions of staff?
Well, I'm not done yet.
Pardon?
I'm not done yet.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's quick.
So this is a view of the property currently. This is the former hotel on the property that's slated for demolition. That's from Fairlawn. This is from 7th. So a little bit about zoning. So the property is located in an area that contains a mix of uses, commercial, apartments, etc. The existing zoning is M3 multifamily, and that was approved in 2020. So that's a recent rezoning action. That was to accommodate the redevelopment of that hotel for apartments. So plans have changed. So this project is proposing to rezone to a PUD with M3 and C2 uses. Property is located within a commercial node per our land use and growth management plan. Mixing uses within a commercial area is supported by the comprehensive plan. So adding higher density residential use contributes to the overall mixing of uses within this commercial area. In addition, the Topeka Housing Market Study noted that there's a need for quality workforce housing. This is the PUD master plan. So as I mentioned, the PUD includes variances for density and parking. The parking variance is established to be at a 1-to-1 ratio, so 1 dwelling unit, 1 parking space. Future site development plans will be reviewed for traffic issues, entrances, building location and design, also landscaping. And if the commercial portion develops in the future, it will require a subdivision plat to divide that property to create that new lot. With that, commissioners, be happy to answer questions.
So now, does anyone on staff have any questions? Mr. Cow?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dan, just a couple of quick questions about looking at the numbers between the number of dwelling units that would be allowed if the action was approved, the application was approved, and the variance on the parking as well. The staff report says that the applicant envisions going from 147 dwelling units to 240, but if this application is approved, it can go to 255. Is that accurate statement?
That is accurate. We set a maximum because they're not sure at this time what their final count will be.
Okay, but the variance allows for 240 in the parking.
The discussion in the staff report is merely for discussion, basically. So the variance is 1-to-1 based on the final unit count. So the parking, if they get to 255, it's 255 parking spaces. So the variance is a 1-to-1 for the number of units that they ultimately build. That's how much parking they would have to build.
Okay, that helps. So I'll ask the applicant the same thing, but if the applicant decides to build out to the maximum of 255, the variance that they are asking for will allow them to have 255 parking stalls.
Yes.
And the site will accommodate that.
I think that's up to the applicant. I think the applicant needs to make that decision through their design of the project. I believe so. They suggested 255 as the max, so I suppose that's possible, but they will ultimately have to make that all fit.
Well, I know there's, again, I'll ask the applicant this too, but there's language in there on the plat, a plat note about common parking between the residential uses and the commercial uses, and also notes that there is likely to be, I think staff says there's likely to be street parking, which would be along 7th Street, I assume.
I don't recall talking about street parking in the PUD. We do, as part of the variance for parking, we do suggest that sharing of parking between the commercial use and the residential could be part of the ultimate decision about how much parking is available for the commercial use. So
But
we-
that shared parking would count towards either the 240 or the 255 or both?
Yeah, it would count for the residential and then and it would count for what we apply to the commercial. So they share that parking. Whatever amount is shared between the two, it still counts for the residential. They're just sharing it as part of the commercial property.
Thank you, Dan.
Are there any other questions of staff? Okay, not seeing any, I would invite representatives of the owner, the applicant.
Good evening, Mr. Chair. Kevin Holland, Cook, Platt, and Strobel Engineers, and here to answer any questions. I can head that off if you want. 250 is a nice number, but it's about impossible to get on that site. Right now, we're pretty much maxed out at about 224 units with 234 spaces, which is specifically for the multifamily parking. The commercial parking would be on its own accord, and as you all would understand in that situation, you don't want to put a commercial development that doesn't have a lot of availability for parking. Otherwise, people aren't going to attend your establishment. And so our owner understands that and is very delicate with that situation. He doesn't want to overload that. And there's no planned commercial site at this point. It's a pad site. Everything else out there, I believe, is C4. And we weren't pushing up into the southeast for the multifamily, so just laid it off separately as a potential C2 site if the need were to be there. I think the owner is extremely excited for it. Those of you that have been in Topeka for a long time, this is a very prominent piece of Topeka where you're coming on I-70. You have the Governor's Mansion to the north, and now you're going to have a brand new development, a 4-story apartment complex to the south. So it's nice to see something being constructed in this area of town because it's been some years since new construction's been there. Also, off of a major arterial, being Fairlawn is a helpful route to be able to get in there.
Are there any questions of the applicant? All right. Thank you, sir. Appreciate
Mr.
it.
Chairman, I
Oh.
have one question.
Go ahead.
I know that the applicant was before the city late last year for IRB financing. Were those IRBs, were they approved and sold?
I would have to defer to city on that.
I'll try and help Commissioner Kalb. No, they were approved. They weren't. There was no transactions because there was no development, and so they are back. We just had a discussion last night at City Council. They are back asking for a new issuance of IRBs for this project. So that'll come before the council in a couple weeks.
Which in
No sale.
a little bit of history on this one, if you may. So this was a project that was going to be redeveloping the existing hotel space into a multifamily space. Went all the way through to get the construction numbers, modified it at that point because the budget numbers became unfeasible for what they were trying to do, which then led to a full scrape of site and full new construction on this site. So I think overall, the previous plan would have been a nice piece, but I believe that this new plan is probably going to be an even more fantastic setting for this location because it's all new. Rehabilitation and modification of existing structures are nice, but brand new structures always have the newer material types and everything looks pretty, and that would be a 2022 version versus a 1972 version with 2022 makeup on it.
Any other questions of the applicant's representative?
Chairman, could I follow up on what Bill's
Sure.
explanation comment about the IRBs? You mentioned, I couldn't quite hear it, Bill, but this is back in front of the city council soon?
Yes, July 12th, it'll be back for action for a new set of IRB approvals.
And that's their resolution of intent to issue the bonds at the action.
Yes,
And that'd be contingent upon this zoning action going through.
clearly, yes. Ideally, it would all go at the same time, but I think the IRB decision, earlier decision will be helpful to continue moving this forward. This should show up at council, this zoning would show up at council in probably the following week of the IRB decision. So we could probably even tee that up for the 12th at the same time.
Thanks again.
Anything further? All right, sir, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, we will now open the public hearing and accept public comments. Is there anyone here to speak regarding this matter that would like to come up? All right, not seeing anyone, so we will close the public hearing then on this matter.
We have one.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Ludi Sapp. I am a co-owner of the business at 5229 Southwest 7th Street. And we would encourage that this property remain zoned for commercial development only. We purchased our property in March of 2021 and have spent a great deal of time and money remodeling this property and establishing our business. We would very much appreciate that this area remain commercial and not be opened up to residential.
Okay. Are there any questions? All right, ma'am. I believe it's already zoned M3 for multiple family dwelling. Is that correct? So it's already zoned for that. This will be changing it to allow that and C2 commercial uses.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir?
Hi, my name is Greg Allen. We have a residence just up the street north in West Hills. I'd like to know a little bit more about what the plan is in terms of accessing these some 240 dwelling units. Is it mostly going to be accessed off of 7th Street, or how is that all that traffic going to be routed? And will there be new traffic lights or other mitigation to handle that increase in traffic?
Okay. We've got your questions.
If you want to see if the applicant can respond to that, because
Sure,
that's a detail that we don't have covered
Right.
in the zoning.
Is there any other, before you're done, are there any other questions you have that we can address?
No, that was my only question.
All right, thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak on this development?
Well, yeah. While Mr. Holland's coming up, there is a requirement for a traffic impact analysis at the time of site plan development. So post-zoning, when they present a site plan, they will show those sort of details, but is there anything you can offer at this time?
For the most part, how you look at the site now is primarily how we would access the site in the future as well. As we're putting the pad site in the southeast corner, the entrance is on the north side of that site that comes into, as we all knew at the Holiday Inn West, or what was called prior. That entrance location will most likely be updated quite heavily, but it'll be primarily in the same location. And then entrances off the side roads, there's some elevation issues that allow, you pretty much have to stay similar to how they are today to function properly without making grade a major issue of coming into the site.
All right.
Go ahead.
Yeah,
Ms. Warren.
yeah, Mr. Holland, will the traffic study take into consideration and compare what the occupancy of the hotel was, do you think? I know it hasn't been operational for a while, but and I don't know what that number is.
It wouldn't, because the new study would take into, and I would hate to defer to your neighbor to the right there probably knows the answer to this, but I believe the new traffic study would take into consideration this use based upon the traffic counts that are on the side roads, as well as the roadways coming from the northeast, south, and west, and put a grade of intersection on all the turning movements throughout there upon the proposed locations for those entrances. But I don't believe the hotel will be considered in that traffic study. It'll be referenced as to the prior use of that. But for the most part, an apartment and a hotel have similar characteristics, except for an apartment with a long-term hotel would be a long extended stay hotel would probably be a little more normal characteristics from a traffic study, because people are exiting in the morning to go to work and coming back home at night, versus a hotel is coming and going throughout the day.
Okay. And the pad site on the front will obviously be taken into consideration as a commercial use?
Correct. And at that point, like I said, there's no plans at this point. They just wanted to set that aside. With that traffic study, we're going to have to put a square footage on that building. We modified this on the PUD, but it's a C2 use. But to be able to do the traffic study, we would have to indicate what square footage that C2 use would be, and actually dive into that a little bit harder to express what that is, to be able to make sure the traffic counts are accurate with what you're doing there.
Okay, thanks. I know this will all get worked out at site plan review, but I just wanted to bring it up.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Calp, did you still have a question?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Holland, if you may have already answered this, if so, I apologize, but I know when the hotel was in operation, coming off that main entrance onto Fairlawn, from time to time, folks would attempt to make a left turn across traffic, across several lanes of traffic to go
To be able to
north
head
on
to the
Fairlawn.
Interstate.
Do you anticipate there'd be controls there to prohibit left turns off of that entrance?
Thinking back, to be honest, I don't believe there would be a controlled left turn there, because it's heading straight into a controlled signal. It is a difficult movement if you're trying to get into, because you're heading if you're headed northbound, I believe there's a signal right there.
Well, there is, but I'm talking about cutting across the lines of traffic and heading north to make a quick access to
And
either
I'd have to
6th
look
Street or
back at the
I-70.
striping on that, because I think technically if your striping is solid, we would not allow that cross traffic across it and try to funnel it out to the side road. But all of a sudden we would probably generate a lot of traffic at that side road as well. So I imagine that the traffic study will probably show the strengths and the weaknesses of entrances and exits for that. But I'd have to look at specifically the exits, northbound exits out of that facility, because I know what you're talking about. A lot of people that would be exiting northbound that jump on I-70 eastbound.
I would think that would be likely. Bill, was that something that traffic folks would take into account as part of their study?
Yeah, the access to the site, the access management, and then whether or not there's enough of an increase based on historic usage that would warrant a control there, so preventing or controlling left turns onto Fairlawn, if I'm understanding.
Well, I'm thinking of the different devices that everybody hates that on Wanamaker.
Roundabout.
No, I think you're probably talking triangle though, correct? Right in, right out.
I'm talking about a device that would prohibit left turns
You're talking
across
like
traffic.
like on Wanamaker in front of Taco Bell there. You're talking about a median out on.
I don't know the
on
names of the
Fairlawn
devices.
itself.
There's just some concrete impediment that channels traffic so you can go right but not left.
Absolutely, and there are multiples, and planning as well as engineering and traffic they'll weigh in quite heavily, I'm sure. And obviously, our developer wants to do it right and not create a traffic nuisance at that area.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Any other follow-up questions? All right, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Is there any further public comment regarding this matter? Okay, not seeing any at this time, we will close the public hearing. Are there any further questions of staff by anyone on the commission?
Mr. Chairman, I guess I'm not quite sure why we're still talking about the possibility of 255, given what the applicant said. Is there some particular logic behind going for that higher number than what they anticipate?
When we were putting final touches on the staff report, we didn't have a solid number at that point. So we talked to the applicant and established a maximum on the PUD. So they can't go beyond the max. If they're going to come short of it, that's perfectly fine.
But does staff see any reason to change the numbers that are in the report at this time?
Not really.
I don't. Technically, whatever they come back with, that's what all the studies will be based on. It won't be based on the which is one reason we defer on the traffic impact study, is until they know exactly their layouts and the number of units. That can all be studied with real data. I don't see a reason to change that. We just need something, because otherwise you're giving a variance that's open-ended. So.
Okay, I appreciate it. So there is a check on this on down the line. So
Correct. If you want to lower it and have the applicant respond to that, that's perfectly fine. But we need something. We need a max.
thank you.
Any other questions of staff or any comments regarding this item? All right, not hearing any, I would entertain a motion regarding this item.
Go ahead. Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I'll go ahead and make it recommend a motion based on the findings and analysis in the staff report. I move that the Topeka Planning Commission forward to the governing body a recommendation of approval of the proposed rezoning from M3 Multiple Family Dwelling District to PUD M3 Multifamily Residential Uses and the C2 Commercial Use.
All right. Is there a second?
I would second.
All right. We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Not hearing any. Chris, would you please call for the vote?
Okay, Mr. Freed,
Aye.
Ms. Herron? Aye. Mr. Kalp?
Aye.
Ms. Messina? Aye. Ms. Pearson?
Aye.
Mr. Tavaven?
Aye.
And Mr. Warner?
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0.
We still got to. All right, our next case on the agenda is item CU 2202 by Providence Homes regarding a conditional use permit to operate a home care type 2 facility. Mr. Warner, you doing this one again?
You bet. All right, commissioners. Next up is conditional use permit. So this property is located at 1920 Southwest 32nd Street. The existing use of the property is home care type 1, which is a permitted use and allows up to 8 residents to be under care. The Applicant is seeking the conditional use permit for a home care type 2, which increases the permitted number of residents under care from 8 to 12. Staff is recommending approval, subject to the conditions listed in the staff report, which I will touch on in a little bit. So the property, along with the neighborhood, is zoned R1 single family. As I mentioned earlier, home care type 1 is a permitted use in the R1 district. So nothing about the operation changes with the CUP other than the availability of 4 additional residents that can be under care at the home. So again, the CUP is required for home care type 2. If we look at our land use and growth management plan, this property is zoned low-density residential, just like the neighborhood. I will note there's a number of review criteria within the staff report that we use for evaluating conditional use permits. And as I mentioned earlier, staff is recommending approval based on the conditions outlined in the report. One thing to note about the conditions, they primarily focus on maintaining the character of the home and addressing some parking issues. With that, commissioners, will be happy to answer questions.
Are there any questions for staff?
This is Commissioner Pearson. Does this take into, are we taking into account this, what is the square footage per person in a facility like this?
The zoning action here does not have a requirement for square footage per person. So that's not a requirement of the conditional use permit or the use in our code.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
Dan, is that saying that consistently across all uses? If I have a state licensed or federally licensed facility, the staying current and compliance with that license is not a condition? I mean, it's not here, it's not listed here as a condition.
I mean, that's just their ability to operate. The definition does talk about being licensed, so I suppose that's possible we could include that as a condition.
So if I lose my license, I'm not only jammed up with whoever the state or feds, but I've also have violated the terms of the CUP and have a zoning violation.
Well, it violates the definition to a certain extent.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions of staff?
I have one.
Yes, sir, Mr. Potter.
I think it mentioned one additional parking space. Is that felt to be adequate?
Commissioner Tababin, the driveway, currently there are four parking spaces, and the additional parking space is actually something that the applicant wants to do. Yes, we believe that's adequate for the use. Yes.
Mr. Chair, can I just confirm something we were touching on with Commissioner Kalp?
Sure.
In the staff report, there is a definition of home care that does require it to be licensed. And so if they do lose the license, it no longer becomes a home care and it can be enforced.
Do you see any purpose served by having that separated out as a separate condition on the CUP just for visibility?
It probably doesn't hurt just to have it, just so everyone's aware that that is a condition of them operating. I have no problem with that. Yeah.
Any other questions for staff? All right, at this time, ask the applicant or its representative to come forward.
That's first, correct? Providence?
Yes.
Good evening. Thanks for listening to us. Oh, sorry, Dan. Okay. Mike Peebler, my home address, 3617 Southwest Nicholas Court, Topeka. Okay, sorry. So yeah, obviously we're here to apply for this continual use permit to remodel some interior parts of the home to add a couple of bedrooms, enlarge a bathroom, and a laundry room and a pantry. Will not change the look of, the outside of the home at all. We'll not be able to tell from there that anything's been done. As was stated, we are licensed by the state of Kansas and have to be to run one of these. Like you said too, there's 8 residents in there now. It's for 8 or 12. 12 is the maximum a Homes Plus can have. We actually just plan on adding 3 additional residents, even though we're adding 2 rooms. In kind of the last year since we've been open, we knew there was a need out there for this and feel like an essential need. I've had 73 people reach out since last July and want to know if we had availability to live here. So we know that need is here. We know our population is living longer, and we're all going to be there at some point looking for, a place. I think one of the best things about the Homes Plus model is the staff to resident ratio. You go into your larger facilities, and I won't get into numbers because I don't, it's not bad. But, we're 4 to 1. And so I think that's one of the most appealing things about this. It's, as I always try to say, I don't want to say it's better, but it's a lot more focused. It allows the families to live in as close to the same manner as they was before when they came from their home, because it is a homeline setting. Luckily, it's a very large home. It allows couples to live together. In a lot of your large facilities, everything's done off a level care, so if the husband and wife are on a different level of care that they need, they can't even live in the same room, let alone the same wing. So, we're lucky enough that we have 3 couples in there right now, and we actually have another couple right now, but we're full. We have another couple right now looking for a space, and, obviously kind of waiting on this too to see if we can get this permit to be able to add on. We real quick, we kind of got into this with my sister-in-law, my brother. She's been a nurse for 38 years and has some long-term background. Her father got dementia. She promised her mom she would take care of him, and she did so for a couple of years, her and my brother both. But at some point, it just got to be too much. And so they looked for places, and they looked all around at all the different options. There's assisted living, independent living, which there's a lot of availability for that, not near as much as the skilled living or nursing home when people need more. And she found a Homes Plus. And obviously it was a very difficult decision to move him in there, but it made it a little easier when he was happy. When he moved in and he did well, and a lot of times they thrive in a much smaller environments, especially folks with dementia, less noise, less activities, or less activity going on all the time with large amounts of people. And last, I'll address real quick, we had the Zoom call, and obviously concerns were brought up, and, we tried to address them as soon as we could. As soon as we knew that there were some issues, with staff outside, we have 2-time staff there 24 hours a day, taking their breaks outside, walking around sidewalks. As part of the being's license, we have to do criminal background checks on every one of those. A little further, Providence Homes Plus even requires a drug screen for anybody that we hire. And we've asked them now, if you're going to take a break, do it out back in a fenced-in backyard where, if that was a bother to neighbors, we listen to that. Some of the yard and some of that. There's a hill on the west side of the house that we had trouble growing grass. I was just trying to get grass seed to grow. It rained hard to wash it down, wash mud on there. I've since sodded that whole area. I think, we've addressed that problem. This will also allow us to do some more things to the yard to make it look a little nicer. That's important to us too. And then the parking was discussed, and traffic, and like I said, we would like to add an additional space. We want to do that in the first place to make it easier if they come to pick up a family member to get in and out. We have made a concerted effort to get everybody into the driveway, which again, the most we have there is 4. As far as people working, me and my sister-in-law and the 2 staff members, not in the evenings, not overnight. Then there's only 2 at the most. So I think, we would address any issues that we can. And lastly, we did take it seriously when the Zoom call with the concerns. And so I talked to a couple of the other neighbors, one that our driveways back up to each other, and asked her if she had any concerns with traffic or parking. And she said no, she didn't. And she worried that, when she had her kids there at times that, she thought maybe she had too many cars out there. But one thing she was interested in, I hadn't thought of, she said, I end up like having you guys there because there's somebody up 24 hours a day. She goes, I kind of look at it as a neighborhood watch. And, I appreciated that. So That's all I got. Do I wait for questions?
Yeah,
or- oh,
yes,
go
you can
ahead.
wait for questions.
Sorry.
Anybody have any questions?
This is Commissioner Pearson. Do you have daytime residents as well?
Yes, this is 20-hour. This is becoming, the Homes Plus is becoming very popular because it is a much smaller place. So for me, who I didn't know much about when I got into it, my sister-in-law, my nephew who's an MD, and it's a nursing home in a house.
Right.
I'm sorry.
I said it wrong.
Oh.
Do you have daycare residents?
No,
Those-
no.
so
No,
you-
they're all full-time residents, yes.
Okay. Do you know what the square footage is?
I believe right now the house is 2,400 square feet without the addition we're going to add on. I know the state does, and I don't know what that number is, but I know to license us, it has to be a certain size to accommodate, that amount of people. And like I say, we're lucky because we have, 2 large living rooms and adequate space for them. And they enjoy being outside too, which is nice.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
This is Commissioner Herron. Can you, I don't know if I consider that.
Yeah, me either.
So if this were approved, would you have to go back before the state and relicense on the new addition to accommodate the residents?
No, I think we just have to apply for the additional 4 residents. Like I say, there'll be some other things. We have to put in a sprinkler system into the whole house. There is other things we have to do, but obviously we have to follow all those state regulations. But I think that's good. It's for the safety of them. We plan on adding a generator so that, power goes out, we don't have any issues, we don't have any problems. This will allow us to do some of that, which I think is much better for the residents and our peace of mind. Like I met when it storms, I'm like, oh, please don't. So it will allow us to do some other things too, to, I think, help the residents there.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anything else? Yeah. All right, sir, thank you very much.
Thank you guys for your time. I appreciate it.
We will now open the public hearing on this matter. If there is anyone here to speak on this matter, you may come forward.
Hello, my name's Pat Reardon, Riordan. I'm an attorney here in Topeka. I represent Tanya Wilson, who's a resident at 3101 Southwest Jewel. And my comments today are going to be number 3.
Mr. River, excuse me, could you put the microphone closer to you?
Here?
Help me out, yeah.
Sure. Okay, sorry about that.
Thank you.
My allergies are killing me with this weather, so I apologize for the hoarse voice. But I have 3 questions or issues that we wanted to raise today. The first one of which is the actual operations and who's controlling the business there. Because at the end of the day, this is designed, the CUP is designed for who the owner is. It's an ownership issue. And we have not seen in the public comments the description as to who actually owns the property. It appears to be owned by Providence Real Estate Holdings, LLC, which is a Texas corporation, which is delinquent at this time. They filed a registration of foreign corporation in 2020. They filed one annual report, didn't disclose who the ownership group was in that annual report, and didn't file one for 2021, so obviously they have until July to file the correct corporate report for 2021, or else they're actually going to be forfeited. There's a chance that this property is going to be owned by a forfeited corporation. And we haven't seen any sort of agency or authorization for the Homes Plus to actually make this application. Homes Plus is the DBA of another Texas corporation called DC Defense Systems. That's also a Texas corporation. It also registered to do business in 2020. It didn't file any annual reports until I had to get reinstated in March of this year. And again, those annual reports don't identify the ownership group, because the annual reports require to specify who owns more than 5%, and those are just blank. And on top of that, the corporate reports that were filed for DC Defense Systems indicate now they're saying that they're a Kansas corporation, although there's nothing filed with the Secretary of State to show that they changed what type of corporation they were. These may sound somewhat legalistic, and I'm a lawyer, so guess what? They are legalistic, but they're also crucial because they affect the real estate. And we don't even know what sort of leasehold interest DC Defense Systems has. They're clearly they have a possessory interest because they're possessing it, running a business. But until these operational questions get answered, I think these are valid concerns of the neighborhood group. They just haven't been addressed in the public documents. That needs to be clarified. And in keeping with that, we also get into the issue of the actual business operations of the business that has the possessory interest at this time. DC Defense Systems is licensed for 8 beds right now with KDADs, so they'll have to change that. But more importantly, in the course of the neighborhood meeting and discussions with city, it's unclear as to whether or not all the residents there at the current time are actually under care. There's that concept of having the married couple there, but it's been somewhat contradictory. And again, I'm not trying to accuse anybody, we're just trying to get to what's going on. But it's unclear as to if all the residents are under care. And the reason why that's crucial is if you look at the definition of a type 2 home care, it requires all the residents there to be under care. Otherwise, what you're really running is a group home. And that's a whole different process to get the approval. Last thing is, we do think traffic is a concern over the weekend. Excuse me. Thank you very much.
Do you have one more minute or the process?
Yeah.
Do you want more time, Mr. Reardon, and ask for extension?
No, I think I've explained myself. And the traffic, that's always going to be a judgment call between who wants the CUP and who wants against it. But there have been times when 7 or 8 cars have been out there and the curb has been full of various cars. And we understand the coming and going, but we do think traffic is going to be a critical issue. Thank you.
Well, hold on. Are there any questions? All right, thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Reardon, come back. I jumped the gun again. Mr. Cow.
Keep looking to your right. Mr. Reardon, just on your first point, about the ownership, are you raising any questions about the ability of the home to operate in its current capacity as a permitted use?
Oh, no. No, I think according to the use tables, it's very clear that a type 1 home is free to operate from there. It's clear that there's a license with KDADs for the 8. So under no means do I mean to imply that the current use is somehow improper or that needs to be changed.
Well, your issue only goes to the whether or not it was the proper parties
exactly
made application for the CUP
right.
for the expanded population.
Right, and the corporate status, the actual owner.
And I'm sorry, your second point, which my notes don't make any sense here, Mr.
Oh,
forgive me, your second point was?
My second point was that it is unclear whether all the residents there and the residents in the future are under care. And if you look at the definition under the code, that, to me, the reading of that definition requires all the residents to be under care.
Excuse me for interrupting you, but doesn't the fact that the Department of Aging and Disabilities, the KDAD, their licensure as a home plus facility, isn't that definitive?
No, because to me, that licensing just means that you qualify for the license. I don't know there are no follow-up inspection reports for DC Defense Industries on the KDAD's webpage. And furthermore, there's been, I don't know what's been represented as to the increase at the 12 in terms of how that's going to operate. And the reason why I think that's important is if you don't have people under care, then you're really kind of just running a group home. And you can try to rezone for that, but that's a whole different situation. But
so your point is you are raising questions about the facility as it exists right now.
I guess you could say that in terms of whether even now the 8 people there are all under care. could be a question by itself. And if they're not, that could be a violation of just even being a type 1 home.
Do you have the definition of undercare with you?
No, it's just strictly the statutory definition is in the code. And this is actually in the application too. It was under 18.55.080. And that, of course, is the massive ordinance that breaks everything by letter. And that's the only definition under care that I could find was there is a definition for home care of type 2 under that statute, but there's no clarifying definition of what under care means.
And just to clarify, and I'm sorry, I cut you off, I apologize. But just to clarify, your concern is, do they have the capacity to provide proper care if they were to extend to 12?
I'm sorry, my concern is if they extend to 12, are they actually having people in there who aren't under care, or who don't require care? So they're there as a married couple, let's say, and one needs care, but one doesn't. That's my concern. I'm not trying to get into the licensing issues as to square footage or what they can do, because I agree that that's probably a KDAD situation. My concern is it's unclear as to whether everybody is going to be under care.
Mr. Chairman, if I might have just one follow-up question about that on your issue of under care. If I have 7 residents today and 6 are under care by your definition and 1 is not, your point is that the entire facility is now a boarding home or lodging home, something other than a home plus?
I'm saying that the entire facility can't meet that definition of home care.
With the consequence being what?
Consequent being that they don't meet the definition of home care, so consequently you've got 8 people living together in a home that don't fall within the permitted use definition for an R1 district.
Which at its worst means an issue with the city of Topeka on its zoning regulations. That means nothing with respect to the state of Kansas and KDAD's licensure of the home as a home plus facility. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'll agree to that as long as they maintain their license with KDAD and they can see that there are 8 beds, that's fine. That's not what, that doesn't mean that everybody there is under care at any particular time. And part of this process at the neighborhood meeting and talking to the staff was unclear whether everybody there was under care. And so at the very least, it just needs to be clarified. And maybe that's a additional use, is showing that not only do you meet the definition of what KDAD would require, but you also have everybody under care to meet the definition of a type 2 home care.
Just one more, Mr. Chairman. If the applicant said that there are 3 couples, I would take that to mean 3 married couples or significant relationship currently in the home. If I'm there and I'm under care, and my wife is there and not under care, you still see a problem with that?
Yes, I do.
So this is Commissioner Pearson. So if I understand you correctly, if the owners were able to, even though I'm not sure it's really has any bearing on this decision, how many people are under care? I think that's a licensing issue. But if they were able to clarify that, would that be helpful for you?
We need some sort of proof or something along those lines to at least show that. And then they would meet the definition of a type 2 home. Commissioner, I do want to stress, I think that it's 2 separate things. There's state licensing, and then that definition under the municipal code for type 2. So I just want to clarify that. I think there is a distinction, but if these issues regarding operations are clarified, that would be incredibly helpful as we move forward. Another thing is their webpage does specify they do adult daycare, and they also do respite care, which goes beyond home care. So again, just tell us what your operations are as they fall within the statutory definition of home care type 2 under the Topeka Code.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who wishes to speak We'll come back to you in a second, but we'll see if anyone else wishes to speak on this matter. All right, sir, we have another person, sorry.
I didn't end up fast enough. Pardon me. My name is Mark Routsong. I reside at 1931 Southwest 32nd, so directly across the street. Facing north, that house faces south. I have some concerns, and I'll try to get through them as quickly as possible. Parking is still a concern. I don't think one additional parking space is going to correct that. Following the Zoom call, there were no fewer than 4 cars taking up that entire side of the street. More specifically, our driveway is one of the ones he might have been referring to. And I know my wife and I did not say it's great to have like a neighborhood watch thing. The other neighbors to the left literally moved in last weekend, so either they were addressing the previous owners or they got to the new people much faster. I have yet to meet them because they've been moving in and out all week. The security doorbell is extremely loud. I realize that's in case somebody wanders off, if there's some sort of dementia, which I really appreciate that security, but it needs to be completely internal to the house. After the Zoom call, it went off at 3:13 in the morning. We can hear it in our bedroom. Our son, who resides on the south side of the house, can hear it. So additionally, if Alzheimer's or some other senior concern is an issue, then that should be addressed with the neighborhood if there's a wandering off concern. I realize most people with that kind of condition are a danger to themselves more than anybody else, but that's a concern. Without sounding crass, is that my time? No. Okay, sorry. Without sounding crass, there have been ambulances there multiple times, Undercare hospice vehicles there. So while a human can die in a home at any time, it is clearly this is scheduled or at least anticipated for residents of this home. As a residential neighborhood, this is very disturbing. I appreciate the quality of end of life care. That's a very appropriate concern. It's just not appropriate for this neighborhood. If this experiment doesn't go well, how easy will it be to resell a house without a garage? I mean, there are 6 parking spots. If the garage is included, the remodel means removing it as a garage. So taking away 2 spots and adding 1 for an already concerned parking bothers me. Additionally, I am concerned that the people in 1941, which is directly across the street, just bought the house. I don't know if they were consulted on any of this. I know they wouldn't have been able to be in the Zoom call at the beginning of the week, at the beginning of that initialed this. Finally, we purchased our home to be a little outside of a main thoroughfare, close to schools and filled with people to call neighbors. It feels like this is becoming a business instead, and I realize that legally that's the case, that can happen, but thank you.
You have 30 seconds.
Oh, thank you, I appreciate it. I'm almost done. Finally, I wish people well. I think this is a great way of doing it. I just don't believe it should be expanded based on the experience so far.
Any questions of this individual? I'm looking to my right, Mr. Cobb. Okay.
You're
All right. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
All right. Anyone else who wishes to speak? And I'm going to wait for a few seconds in case anyone else wishes to stand up, come forward. All right. Not seeing anyone, I am going to ask the applicant to come forward. If you could.
Lisa could, I can come up, but she could, I think, address at least his concern about
Well, if you both, right.
Oh, yeah, at least you can, yeah, let her come up, because I think she can address the question of if they're just there or in-home, however, I can't remember how you put it, sorry.
Hi, I'm Lisa Peebler. I'm the RN operator of the business. I do have an operator's license. I do the daily operation of the business. And I will also say that every resident that's there, all 8 of them, couples and and singles are all under the care of a licensed physician who admitted them there. They may not have the same level of care, but they all need some type of care. And they are all under a licensed physician who admitted them to our home for this very purpose.
Okay. All right, well, thank you for that. There was a issue about the security doorbell.
We do have security, we do have when we open the outside doors, they do make a sound, and that is to alert staff that someone's coming in and out. Either it's visitors that we have to screen, or it's if residents are going out, then we're aware of that.
All right. Is that an issue about volume? Has that been raised before with you?
I don't think so, but again, I can't hear it across the street. I'm not there. I mean, look, there's things we can do to change that. There's different types of tones or even systems that we could put in place if that's a problem, and we have no problem with addressing that if that's an issue. Like I said, we don't want to be a problem to anybody.
All right, and there was a question about will the house be able to be resold if the garage is converted and won't be a garage anymore? Is that anything that you've addressed, or?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I'm not a realtor, so I can't say. I mean, I know people would like a garage, but I mean, I think it could still be a single-family home.
Are you changing the exterior of the house?
No, not at all. We're even leaving the garage door, because again, that's one of the pluses, no pun, to this, is that it looks like a home. It has that feel, and so no, we do not want to change the way the outside of the home looks. So from my perspective, they will not be able to tell anybody. If you drive down the street, you won't be able to tell that, we did any remodeling inside.
All right. And then there was also a question about actual ownership.
That, I don't even know how to explain it. Like I said, we're a family-owned business, and my nephew and his best friend, and that's where you get the DC Defense. It's Dave and Casey. They were both military, and they're both doctors, so that's how they initially came up with it. And I know we do, I guess, whatever you preside as a DBA. So the real estate holding company that owns it, Dave lives in Texas, so I think that's why I guess it's technically a Texas business. The specifics on some of the other, I don't know, but I mean, we are the owners. Yes, we have a percentage. We all try to have equal say in what we do and what decisions we make, but the ownership group it's just still all family. Dave just happens to live in Texas.
All right. Are there any other questions or follow-up?
On the issue of ownership, I've got to tell you, I wasn't tracking everything that counsel for the neighbor was saying, but the title to the property is held by who?
Providence Homes Plus, Providence Real Estate.
I'm sorry?
Providence Real Estate LLC.
And I think they set that up. I don't know. I'd have to ask them. I don't know. That financial side. That's why I let them take care of it.
Yeah, it's run by David Lee, who's one of the doctors that own this company. Nobody outside of us 5 owns it. Anything to do with it.
Any further questions or other questions? Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
With that, then, we will close the public hearing and then ask if there are any more further questions of staff or any other comments by anyone on the commission.
This is Commissioner Herron, and my question kind of is, I'm assuming you all have a formal process of determining ownership before they submit application. So was that taken into account?
Yeah, when they submit the application, they have to sign as the owner or an authorized agent for the owner. So the application absolutely has to be signed by who's filing the owner of the property or an agent for that person.
Mr. Cobb.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mary, I don't know if this is all first time coming up to your attention tonight, these questions about the ownership. Do you hear anything that might want to make us give pause to taking action on the application tonight?
No, I didn't hear anything that raises any kind of a legal concern concerning this land use decision that you all have to make. If you want, you could make it a condition of granting the PUD that the owner complies with all state and federal, local licensing requirements, because the Planning Commission does have the ability to revoke a conditional use permit if the conditions are not met. So that may give you some comfort.
And I did look at some of the administrative regs that are applicable to a Home Plus facility, but I didn't see anything related to KDAD's determination of, or any requirements they have for ownership of any of the facilities. I don't know if they have anything on the books there, but let's assume they do. I mean, it's pretty likely that you have to pass some kind of muster with KDAD's in order to get the Homes Plus licensure. If the condition that we referred to earlier, that you just alluded to, a condition added to the list of conditions here that at all times the applicant must maintain a current licensure with KDAD's as a Homes Plus facility, we should get some comfort level from that.
Yes.
Both with respect to the Undercare issue and the ownership.
Yes, I agree.
And, Mr. Chairman, I would also add, just on this Undercare, I'm not concerned about the argument that's been made tonight on that at all. But in order to avoid situations like this coming up in the future, it might be worth staff's time to take a look at the various facilities that we have, and you match them up with what the state licenses. And I've seen this done in other cities where you make reference to the actual license that the state issues and the administrative regs that those licenses are issued and operate under. So, you put the onus on the state of Kansas because it's, the operation of these facilities is 90% a state function.
Commissioner Cal, point taken. I think in our last, well, not our last, but a previous update to the zoning code with our definitions, we did that. We matched the name. This didn't always used to be called a home care, but it matches with the definition of the state and what our municipal definition is. So we did try to do that, and so it was very confusing, trust me, before. It's still not completely straightforward, but it's better because we know when they say Homes Plus, and we have, that's home care.
So if I look at home care type 2 facility under our regs, there's a rough equivalency there with the Homes Plus licensure that the state does.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, we don't have the plus in there, but it's the same.
Good.
Yeah, thank you. Commissioner Pearson, I'm going to play my new commissioner card, if that's okay. I see the list of conditions under here in the recommended motion. What is the recourse for the residents if they find that the owners are not in compliance?
Commissioner Pearson, if there's a concern or a complaint that's forwarded to our office, we investigate. Our zoning inspector would go out and talk to the owner, do some observations, whatever it takes to understand if compliance has been violated or not. At that point, it goes through an enforcement process to make sure that they come back into compliance within a certain amount of time. If they don't, then they would could jeopardize this CUP. This CUP could be revoked, as was mentioned, I think, earlier. That is, and I believe that comes back to you to recommend to the governing body for revocation.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions for staff or comments? Not hearing any, I would, at this point, entertain a motion regarding this item.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Cow.
I would move approval, as set out in the staff report of the CUP, with the 5 conditions that are listed, and the addition of a 6th condition that may be a bit conceptual, but it amounts to, at all times during the lifetime of the CUP, that the facility maintains current licensure as a Homes Plus facility, licensure with KDAS, the Kansas Department of Aging and Disability. Words to that effect.
If I could just wordsmith it, would it be sufficient to indicate, condition number 6, maintain compliance with licensure requirements of the Kansas Department of Disability and Aging Department, or Kansas Department of Disability and Aging, period. Is that sufficient?
I would like to have that, holding a current license. They're not only, it's maybe redundant, but they meet the licensure requirements and hold a current license.
Okay. Hold a current license and maintain compliance with the requirements of the Kansas Department of Disability and Aging.
That's good.
Okay.
So we have a motion. Is there a second?
I just have a question. So if they don't maintain their license, the CUP would go away?
It would be jeopardized, and it would spur an action to come before you to revoke the license, to revoke the CUP, conditional use permit, yes.
But they could continue to operate with up to 8 residents just as a permitted use in the R1 district. You always have that underlying rights in the R1 district.
Well, they have to maintain licensure, though.
Right, yeah, if they maintain license, that is true. You can.
You lose the CUP, but you maintain the permitted use.
You get up to 5 unrelated, no license. After that, then, if they lose a license, then I think, I'm not trying to tell them how to get around this, but yeah. 5, they could go down to 5 unrelated people, whether they're giving care, whether they have license. Anybody can do that in single family.
All right, we have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Is there any further comment or discussion? Okay, not seeing any. Chris, would you please call for the vote?
Mr. Warner?
Oh, he is,
Oh, that's right.
Abstain.
Mr. Tvalman?
Aye.
Ms. Pearson?
Aye.
Ms. Messina?
Aye.
Mr. Kalf?
Aye.
Ms. Herron?
Aye.
And Mr. Freed?
aye.
Motion passes 6-0 with 1 abstaining.
We do need to get Mr. Warner back in for the,
Oh, can you go get?
I'll go get them.
Didn't know there was a new commissioner card. I never got one.
You got it, you just didn't know
I just
how to
haven't
use
used
it.
it. Okay. I reserve the right to use my 3. Okay, that's perfect. Okay, perfect. She said that. I was like, oh, I should have said that a long time ago.
So long as you keep asking the questions.
Every meeting is a new meeting.
all right. Now that we got our full group back together, next item is action item under E, missing middle amendments.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. As you recall, a couple months ago, we had a presentation and nice discussion with you all of where, if you wanted to take the plunge, so to speak, and consider a process to amend our codes or policies, that would encourage what we are calling more missing middle housing. So we took, at the end of that meeting, we said we would come back basically with a scope of work that outlines the goals of our ANDA process, but the goals we want to accomplish, and the product we want to produce, and the issues to examine. And so that's what we attempted to do here with this draft, is bring a scope back to you. I'm not going to go over, I'm not going to walk through this, but I will touch on a couple points. Obviously, we want to, for those listening or not aware, missing middle housing, when we talk about that, that's anywhere from a 2 to 20 unit complex. And when we talk about accessory dwelling units, that is a dwelling unit that is really is a smaller independent unit that is on a lot that already has a single family house. So we're going to use those terms. I just want to get that out there. We definitely had shown you last time, and then we tried to describe here what the policy support is for doing this, or for at least examining our codes and some of the trends that are going. And so we find substantial alignment with our land use and growth management plan, the citywide housing market study, and also the demographic trends that we presented to you. So we try to encapsulate that in this scope. And through our staff examination of our codes and policies of what we might consider barriers or types of reform, we landed on a couple that we think we would want to further examine with your permission. Number one is, do we want to allow any sort of second dwelling units in our single family districts? Just plain and simple. And that could be an accessory dwelling unit, as I mentioned. It could be a duplex. It could be attached. It could be within a current single family home. It could be detached. All that to be part of the examination to come back to you with of what that could look like. We had a couple guiding principles here. When we look at that, we do think it should be equitable, meaning whatever we come up with, if we come up with a code change, it really should be uniform across zoning districts in our city. So if it's R1 and R2 type districts, it shouldn't be relegated to just R1 or R2 in certain parts of the city. It should be applicable to any neighborhood that is zoned for that purpose. Character, we think is a big thing to make sure nothing that we would end up approving could lead to something that is out of place with or deemed to be out of place with that neighborhood. And then restrictiveness, we don't think there should be any less restrictive than some other accessory type uses that are allowed in single family neighborhoods. You just heard one here tonight, home care. Short-term rentals is another one that we just approved. Home occupations is something you may not know a lot about, but that is an administrative allowance for a business in a single family district. So there are certain accessory uses that have standards and criteria that if you meet it, you can do that in R1 and R2 districts. So we don't think it should be any looser, I guess, for this for missing middle housing than what we currently have on the books for other accessory uses. The second reform would be along parking and looking at all of our residential uses for appropriate parking ratios. We had another ratio variance tonight. That's kind of what we want to examine more. Parking is not just a cost. It is a significant cost to the development and the affordability of the tenants as well, but also it eliminates a lot of sites. If our current parking requires 2 units, sorry, 2 spaces per unit, and if, as you heard tonight, you know, they're going to have trouble even fitting the 1-to-1, but whatever that unit count ends up being, it certainly isn't going to be 2-to-1. So in certain instances, should we be giving more administrative leeway so they don't all have to come back to you or the governing body? So we're just not sure that well, we know our parking requirements are pretty outdated. I will say that. So that requires examination and a proposal potentially to come back to you. And then the last potential reform to look at would be some dimensional standards. By and large, we have made changes throughout the years that, and this goes back to the early days of, for instance, front yard setbacks. Many of the older neighborhoods have homes that are built within 5, 10 feet, 15 feet of the property line, and it creates, you know, that character for the neighborhood. And infill homes, and there's usually smaller lots. Our current setback standards for front setbacks are 30 feet, anywhere from 25 to 30, and so that may end up creating a disjointed character if we were to require that. So we've allowed administrative variances to that front setback as long as you maintain architectural character in massing for that block. So we've done stuff like that in the past. We have that in the code. We recognize any lot, for instance, that has been created. So any legal lot of record, whether it meets our minimum lot size or not, you can build on that. And this comes into play a lot, again, in the older neighborhoods where you used to have 25-foot wide lots. Well, you didn't used to. They were all planted with 25-foot wide lots for the most part. And some of those have been combined into 50-foot wide lots, 37.5, whatever. Today, that wouldn't meet our minimum width or probably our minimum lot size in those districts. So we recognize those lots. So they are not prevented from having a house on the lot, is the point. But we do think there's a couple others we should look at, and those are stated in the scope. The process itself, I think, is one that is probably needs to be a little more far-reaching than, I don't want to downplay our normal process, but again, some of our more complex code amendments, the signs, for instance, the short-term rentals. There's some other ones that we went through and we reached out to a lot more people than would be your standard changing some code text, because they really impact citywide residents and citizens. So we do think a little more careful approach, where one that may include, and we're proposing a survey to be deployed online. We have a draft for an ADU survey in your packet to gauge public support, concerns, issues. We've had some pretty good success with doing those in the past, and also it brings awareness of what we're trying to examine here, and that reaches more people, and I think that's a good thing. We want to reach people. Web page, of course, that we normally do for all of our major projects. A work group potentially. We're suggesting some walks of life that we've done this with other things, the sign code in particular, design standards. We've done that. We've had a group of people help us bring more crafted proposals to you. and they can be more of a sounding board before it gets to the full body. So we're recommending doing something like that. We also throw out the idea of a focus group or two. There are neighborhoods, I think, that could fall on very much so on either side of these issues, and I think going to them with early and also after we have some more thought through proposals will only help you be more informed and have a better solutions. And then lastly, your involvement, which is, by the way, I would recommend, and I think we've had a couple volunteers, I'm looking over yonder, that may want to be on that work group. I think that's great. But you can appoint whoever you want to. You can leave that up to, walks of life, certain people that you want to see on there for stakeholders. But as a group, you would then, we would want to have at least a couple public hearings. There's always going to be one in the end where you have some action. But I think the twist here would be to have one before that as well. And so I don't know what the timing of that might be, how early on, you could just have a full open mic night, come on down, and here's what we're trying to look at, or you can have a little more meat on the bone, so to speak, get the survey out, do some work, have a little more of a, here are the issues and potential recommendations, maybe midway through the process. But either way, those are your kind of your options, we think. We don't want to, I think in the goals, I probably wrote that we should consider this in a timely manner, which is why we are trying to limit the scope, so this just does not become a kitchen sink type process, that we have some targeted, intentional things that we're looking at. Will things come along during that process that we might want to include, that you might want to include? Yes, that's perfectly fine, but it also keeps us from getting misdirected and off on another path that can slow things down. There might be other avenues to address things other than this that we can use. So with that, that's kind of the outline of the scope or the reasons for it. It is under your agenda as an action item. I believe there was sentiment to have the Planning Commission put a stamp on this before we go out and do anything publicly. So that's why it's under action, but you certainly can do whatever you want to with that. Send us back to work, come back later, tell us to take a hike, whatever you want to do. But if you feel this is roughly about what you want, then yeah, it's ready to be active. Thank you.
Looked like we had a couple of people reaching for microphones. Did anybody have any comments or questions?
Yeah, I can start. Are we bundling these two topics that you talked about? Okay.
Yes.
One project.
Yes. This is a proposed package of the things, the 2 or 3 things we would look at.
Bill, this scope of work looks really good. There's just one thing that kind of catches my eye that concerns me about the accessory dwelling units, which I'm glad that it's a high priority. It should be a very high priority. I was surprised to see that Shawnee County provides for accessory dwelling units in their regulations, which is kind of odd that the county would have it before we do. But my concern, you emphasized this, I think, at the last meeting too, Bill, about the need to have accessory dwelling units uniform across the zoning district. And I want to ask you this, do you see any merit to the idea of having, for example, saying that an ADU is a use that is allowed in all R1 districts, but it's a permitted use in some, for lots that have certain characteristics, and conditional use in others? For example, this is an example, a lot that is served by an alley, where the ADU can take access off an alley, or where you have a lot that's over a certain size of square foot. There it is a permitted use, it's handled administratively. But if there is no alley, or the lots are smaller, or whatever characteristics we come up with, there's still a right to have an ADU subject to getting a conditional use permit.
Yeah, I think that's why I love Topeka and zoning. Topeka and zoning, trying to create standards that can be applied to all neighborhoods. I mean, we're a very diverse age and architecturally, and just our blocks are all, I mean, all over the place. And so hitting that sweet spot of what are the standards that won't overly bias a certain area over another, I think is key. And that's what we're trying to get across here. If it's an...
I appreciate that.
I'm thinking out loud about your alley thing, and I just, not everybody has alleys. So, but for those that do have alleys, that could be a benefit if it's in the rear, or your parking can be in the rear, structure could be in the rear. For those that don't have alleys, then what does that mean? Does that mean you have less of a right? I don't know those questions yet.
Well, I don't either, but you still do have, meet your goal of uniformity across the zoning district, but then there's another level that, whether it's a permitted use, or whether it's conditional or special use, whatever you want to call it, and you can build in, make it almost a presume that conditional use or special use would be allowed, in the absence of some other factors. So you get a little closer to somewhere between the conditional use and the permitted use. It lies in there, but there's still some closer examination of the physical property before somebody could.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, yes. If we could write a code that applied to every property in the city, then, I'm in the wrong business. Then you can't, you have to look at context. Context is very important. One size does not fit all. So we didn't mean to imply anything else other than we want to treat, actually that's probably a better way of putting it, is the context.
So if we approve the scope of work as drafted, this language that I mentioned here, that's not going to prevent us from having discussions along this line.
No, no, and you can change the scope at any time if you feel like you need. I mean, if that's the words and whatnot. But this is a start. This is our start.
Yeah, well, I'm one person. So, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, do you want me to just do the one at a time, or you want me to go through the whole thing that I have questions about?
As much as, yeah.
Okay.
Go one at a time if that's.
Yes, the beginning of the scope of work is great. I did have some questions, kind of like Commissioner Kopp, in terms of how much allowance we have. So, like, for instance, you could literally just get rid of single-family zoning and open up all kinds of possibilities that way. But it's not reflected in the scope. I'm trying to figure out where and how much attention those kind of different ideas from the three strategies that you've laid out will be considered. That's kind of my first thing. And I'm especially concerned, like, as opposed to having tax rebates, are there any other economic incentives? I had a conversation with someone and said tax rebates are great if you have money and you need a tax rebate. If you don't need a tax rebate, what other incentives are there for us to do infill, do other types of things to create housing beyond a tax rebate? So are there any other economics that we can consider? In terms of the survey, I'm curious, what is your normal target that you shoot for? Or is there a target that you shoot for? And how is it distributed? Is it just on the website that it's done? And if it is, how do you drive people to it? And how do you work with people who do not have access to the internet to be able to gather their responses as well? And the content of the survey was actually very concerning. It seemed very biased to a homeowner or someone who is owning land, but I would think part of what we would be wanting to find out is that, especially since a lot of this seems to focus around ADUs. I think one of the biggest questions we should be trying to figure out is, does anyone even want to live in them? I personally do. I'm a tiny house fanatic. But is this a viable option for this part of the country as a housing strategy? Are people going to prefer something different than a detached ADU? So I guess I'm curious. And then also kind of the different types. I think I reviewed the first PowerPoint, and it talked a little bit more about the different types. And I feel like right now we're already kind of zoning in on one type. For instance, I think it's called a carriage court, where you have units facing each other. I see examples of that in the older part of the city, but I don't see it in other parts of the city. So, also creating a survey that asks even just that basic question, maybe from a renter's point of view, what are they looking for? What kind of conditions would make this a feasible option for them? Yeah, I'm done. Oh, and the timeline. When are you planning on starting, and when are you anticipating the meetings would be held? You probably don't have an answer to that.
Yeah, I'll try. I'll work my way back. Timeline-wise, I don't have a timeline, but I would. In these processes in the past, they always take longer. By the way, I could sit here and say 6 months, 1 year. My feel is we don't really know until we get through some more public input. But I think that will probably take us to the end of the year to do that.
Well, once the scope of work is approved, when do you see the work groups starting, I guess? I might be volunteering. I'm not sure.
Sure. Well, we take volunteers.
I know you do.
And you can appoint folks. That's your prerogative. We're here to suggest things. It'll start. I don't think it should start before the survey. I think the survey is the first thing you want to lead with, because you want that work group to have some guidance. In fact, we probably want to share that back with you, some of those results and where we're going before we even have that work group. So I think the work group comes a little bit when it's a little more formed. Some of that feedback is known. My best guess on that. Survey-wise, I would concur. I think that survey that we have drafted is a little biased towards a homeowner. We had a little trouble figuring it out, and we welcome your input. Is it more to gauge the interest, like you said? Do people even want this, or is it more to gauge the non-user, user versus non-user?
Well, I think you need both, actually, to
Yeah.
get a comprehensive picture.
But we also, we were trying to limit it to a certain number of questions and still get the most important data for us. So, yeah, so it ended up being a little bit of both, but, yeah, I think if I'm a renter and I'm going through here, I don't see the easy check mark for me to answer something. So we can look at that. Pushing it out is more of in the past we do press releases, social media, Nextdoor, Facebook, Twitter, the neighborhoods that we have on file, for instance, the NIAs and the NAs would be getting the officers, our community engagement folks would get it out to them, the CAC. We have a giant list of consultants, developer consultants types. I mean, so we push it out on our own mailing lists, but that's the normal channels. Try to get.
Do you know what your typical response rate is?
How many did we get back, like, for the signs? That was.
We did a survey for signs and design, and we had over 1,000 responses on that.
Well, now you're saying the mark.
I mean, that was pretty great. And I don't know, I forget what else we've done recently. Downtown, I think we had pretty good turnout on downtown.
That's right. That was probably a couple hundred.
Yeah.
And then you get all the comments that come with it, just on top of that. I would like to think a couple hundred, minimum would be a nice response. Okay, help me. I'm working my way back through your questions here. The first couple questions.
Economics. As opposed
Incentives.
Yeah.
There aren't. This is an incentive, economic incentive. So if we do this right.
I'm just saying that.
But in addition, yeah, outside of a code amendment that would limit parking, for instance, there isn't necessarily another incentive.
Outside of a
to
tax
do it.
rebate.
Correct. Correct. And then the first question.
That was more observations, just making sure that there is a way for other, you have three pretty clear-cut strategies. I'm just wanting to make sure I understand that there is a way for other ideas to be considered during this process.
There are, and there is, eliminating single-family zoning is not one of them. You would have to tell us that's what you want. That is not what we're proposing.
Okay.
Okay.
I just need to know that someone could come into a meeting and someone would listen to them.
Yeah, no, and that's kind of why we want to do this scope is because this is a rabbit hole. I mean, a good, in many ways, a good rabbit hole because you get that sort of discussion. But we're going to lose some focus if it's the kitchen sink. So we did it that way intentionally. We said, look, can we try to get something done within the next 12 months? With good input, good feedback, good deliberations, and well thought through. That balances everybody's interests. That's our hope. To do that well, to do it right, yeah, you're probably looking at a 12-month process. But
then I think as you start pushing out information, you need to make that very clear that these are the three things that we feel like will get the most bang for our buck, as opposed to, well, I think eliminating single-family housing would, but.
Right.
So all of our marketing will be with the three strategies together, so like all of our surveys and our meetings? Or going to be handling them like kind of separately under the same project scope?
That's a good question.
No, it's missing middle amendments. The missing middle in this case would be opening up single-family zoning for second units.
And then also
You define
addressing
second
parking.
units, but I'm not opening it up. Me personally, I'm not going out there and saying, hey, what about 3 units? What about 4 units? If that sort of thing comes up, and we think, oh, wow, there's a lot of support, well, we're hearing a lot of that people are okay with that under certain conditions, then we could open up the scope more and say, like I said, along the way, you pick up things like, oh, I didn't think that would be something but we would bring that back to you. So I think this is the opening of what we would go out to expect. Because I think if we get 2 units allowed in single-family districts, you're doing pretty good.
Oh, okay, I see. So,
I mean, I don't.
make sure I don't cut anybody. So we're just starting off with ADUs and introducing that to gauge what the community interest is before we expand to additional missing middle options.
In single-family districts.
Yeah.
Yeah, second units in single-family districts. When you have 88% of your zoning single-family, having a second unit will have a profound impact. So I think you could do some more, and that's what we had in sort of the outside the scope, some other reforms. I think you could look at policy in the LUGMOM with more missing middle rezonings. You would still have to rezone for a quad or a triplex or a sixplex. We're not saying you can do that by right or by some condition by right in single family. We're saying that can be accomplished. That's a much bigger conversation to have. Let's have that. If we can do anything like this, then let's assess at that point whether you want to then go to the bigger conversation. If you want to go to the bigger conversation first, then I'm afraid that you're going to lose out on some things that we can get some wins on. That's and it'll get drowned out. So you're looking at trying to build a case, and you start with what we think would be the most feasible and most impactful. That's mainly the parking, and that's the second units to me. The dimensional stuff is nobody pays attention to that. We do, and we know what's changed, and that it's important, but it's not holding. It's really not preventing any missing middle at this moment because we come to you variance. But we could open that door. So yeah.
Yeah, no, just hearing what you said helped me, because I think when I was reading it, I was reading it in the context that we were addressing missing middle as a whole versus focusing on ADUs. So that helps me understand the survey a lot more, because I think I was just reading it a little bit different. So.
Well, the parking will address more than single.
And the sprinkler system would be awesome. I know
Yeah,
there was
we already
conversation about that
we
too,
noted
so
that we
I think there's
already-
some good things in there.
We already exempt some stuff in 3 and 4 units. In fact, we just got a proposal to do a sixplex somewhere within the city. It's zoned properly, and by the way, they divide the walls. They don't need to put any sprinklers in that by our building code. So that's a huge savings right there. But yes, missing middle, again, up to 20 units sort of thing. We want to make sure our parking is also addressing anywhere from 2 to 20 unit type developments. In terms of allowing single family zoning, missing middle, it would be limited to a second unit at the most right now, unless we hear otherwise. So.
Neil, could I ask you two questions about the survey, the ADU survey? There were 2 questions because there are 2 other questions that stumped me. Number 8, what would be the largest barrier to overcome if deciding to pursue an ADU. I think I don't know how I'd answer that, because you don't know what the regulatory hurdle is going to be. I would suggest not having that in the survey. I don't know what it would. I don't know what the results would tell you. That's my thought. The other thing was the question about income, and I don't think I understand the purpose of that question, and I'm also concerned about how that is seen by the people doing the survey, if it'll discourage participation in the survey.
Yeah, I mean, you could say the same thing about age. I mean, I don't know. I mean, that's a very standard, you want to have some sense of your demographic that's answering.
I'm sorry, say what?
You want to have some sense of your demographic that's answering it? Are you getting a lot of folks making over $100,000, or is it pretty, well distributed? Are you getting a lot of folks under 24, or are you getting, so you kind of, that will gauge, oh, we got a very good response that people want this, and then we look and we say, oh, that's everybody under 24.
Well, I'll give you that, but I don't know that I've ever had any confidence in the validity of the responses on that kind of question. But the question 8 about...
Now we know how you answer those.
But that question number 8, I really would ask your thoughts about whether or not to include it in the survey, because shorter is better, I suppose. Sometimes.
Yeah, we're trying to come up with something to tell us what is your biggest barrier to doing an ADU. And we know actually financing has been, we know not all financial institutions get it, know how to handle this. There's not a lot of comps out there, Regulatory could mean a number of things as well, parking and size and placement, et cetera. But I get that. I do.
But that also makes the assumption that there are throngs of people trying to build an ADU at this point in time.
Right. Yeah.
And we don't know that that's even the case.
Yeah.
So,
My guess is you're going to be introducing a lot of people to this concept.
right.
Build it and they'll come.
Well, and I had kind of on this, for 8, I just thought that what I wrote down, it might be good to have like 3 points to kind of define a generality of what the regulatory is. And then another point that you may want to add is consumer perception as being a barrier. Like, what will the neighbors think? What will, my community think? I think that might be a good indicator. And then I also suggested maybe inserting pictures of what current ADUs are in the community in the survey, because someone may read this and still not register. Like, they may think of a shack in their backyard, but it's actually going to be a very beautiful structure that fits in perfectly with the neighborhood. So I think just including maybe 3 different pictures of what current ADUs are in the city might be very helpful to get a more well-rounded response.
Yeah, I think you have to look at this as you just said, as more of an educational process, because we are not on the coast where they're like much more popular than they are here. And so this is part education and part how do we introduce this as a viable housing strategy. So, I mean, I'm all about a survey because you're right, it does raise awareness. And sometimes they can even provide you with good information. Well, you gotta have a good response rate to get good information. So, that's why I asked what your typical response rate is. Because I would hate to base a citywide policy on 200 people's opinion.
Yeah, I hear you. I mean, did we do a survey for STRs? I mean, I don't know that we do a survey every time we do a code amendment. I'm just saying that. But since this could affect 88% of people who live in single family, it's like our whole population.
Yeah,
it's probably a good thing to do.
Yeah, I definitely think as a way of engagement, this is a viable strategy. I'm just saying, let's get as most bang for us buck as possible.
We appreciate that. The pictures, we talked about that of actually doing it, because one of our most successful surveys was the visual appeal survey. You all remember the
Right.
appeal survey. We had great success with that. So yeah, putting pictures, what is this, we're already talking about ADUs like it's a separate structure. It doesn't have to be a separate structure. It could be your basement. It could be above your garage. It could be within your home. So, yeah, education. We'll take a look at the barrier one if we can't come up with a better way to. I like hearing who the audience, who you think, what the purpose of these questions are. If it's to help. Assuming people are not going to know what these are off the top of their head, first of all, they may not even take the survey if they don't. What is that? I'm not kind of. But also, if we think it's going to be people taking it that have an interest from a negative standpoint as well, you know what I mean? We're like, okay, well, what are the things we should be looking at that would make this more palatable? So even if you don't know what it is, we need to have some questions in there for them. Yeah.
So, one, because I've been cutting everybody off too soon tonight. Anybody else have anything, any other questions or comments? So are you just wanting a consensus from us, or you want us to actually be taking a vote?
It's up to you. I remember the conversation last time when you were pretty adamant that we don't do anything until you agree to it. So I would like a vote.
All right.
Personally.
So just,
Gosh.
Am I not remembering that correctly?
So does anyone want to offer a motion or of some kind that we can take a vote? So
I make a motion that the staff proceed with refining the scope for the, what is it called? Meeting?
middle, missing middle.
Missing middle, I'm sorry, missing middle housing project. Is that good enough?
Well, so let me understand. So to proceed with the scope as they've drafted it.
To continue to refine it.
So you want us to come back again with changes?
Or inform us of them in some way, shape, or form.
So I think the question is whether they can move forward with the process with what they've written, or do you want them to come back with something else to come back before they start the process?
Oh, you probably don't want me to do this.
Well, I'm just trying to clarify what you're doing, so I know what
We'll proceed consistent with the discussion we've had here tonight.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
That works.
That sounded good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Does that include the motion include the survey as well?
So the discussions about the survey?
Yeah.
What if we, first of all, if you want to make any changes now, please let us know to this scope as a body. Otherwise, we will proceed. The survey, though, I almost feel like I don't know if you want to see this again. You may want to see this again, but you don't have to see it again. We've got very good feedback tonight. I think we know some changes we want to make. It's just, do you want us to bring those changes back to you would be my.
I, for one, would like to see the survey again.
Okay, in this setting or kind of as a in-between meetings? You want us to schedule this on the agenda for next month?
As opposed to meeting separately, or just like an email?
As opposed to an email?
Just sending it out for comments, if you want to make any suggestions, as opposed to doing a formal review at another meeting.
I'm okay with an email.
I'm okay with
Okay. So would it be fair to say if everyone, are you just comfortable then proceeding based on the conversation tonight with an email? And is there anyone that would object to that? And we can just kind of do that as a consensus?
Okay.
Are you comfortable with that?
We're not.
Do you trust us?
Do you trust us? Yes, no survey will be sent out until you see it.
Okay, perfect.
How's that?
Just one comment, if you're going to do it by email, do not reply all.
Yes.
We don't want to run afoul of the
Thank you. I send out many emails saying that exact thing at the start, so thank you for that, Mary. I
I did
appreciate
have
that.
one quick question before we finish. I promise, I know it's getting late. I did want to make a comment that I do think it's important for us to continue to consider expanding housing options, just as someone who is a young Topekawan. I think it's very important that we really consider providing diverse housing types to our community for, housing equity access, financial equity access. There's a lot of needs for it. So I'm definitely agree in line with the scope and the reasoning behind it. So I'm not against this, but I do want to say that I think it's important that we continue to keep that type of mind for however we move in the future. Okay, I'm done.
All right, next thing on the agenda is communications from staff. If there's any more.
The only one is an update on the zoning cases. We got the downtown D3 zoning passed last night. You will never hear about downtown zoning again. So it's all done. It's all done. All three phases are done, and congratulations to Dan. Bryce and I know worked very hard on those, so thank you. That's all my comments.
All right. Motion to adjourn? Second?
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And we'll do a formal vote on that one, Chris, and we're done. Thank you very much.
All right.